Good evening, everyone. Welcome to day 2 mini-series of Reduce Educator Burnout. I'm Shylla Webb, education consultant, and I'm so thankful that you're here with me. If you are watching, please say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're tuning in from. If you're catching the replay, indicate that you're watching the replay. If you've been with me on my past mini-series, you will know that I'm a little bit newer to Facebook Live. And so if you have any comments or questions throughout this training, go ahead and post them, and then I will be sure to follow up and answer them if I'm not able to watch them during. You'll see my eyes bouncing around because I'm trying to watch for your comments as well. So for day 2, we are going to talk about burnout and how it happens. If you missed day 1 of this mini series, please go back and watch it. It is posted in the Facebook group. We define burnout. It's a psychological syndrome, a psychological syndrome of emotional exhaustion. It's depersonalization and reduced sense of accomplishment. And that was defined by Christina Maslach, who is one of the main researchers of compassion fatigue. She had defined or just made the definition of burnout with her colleagues. And that is really what stands for today. So we talked about also signs of burnout. We went through those. They fall in 2 buckets. They fall in hyperarousal and hypoarousal. I did post a checklist of these symptoms. So if you haven't had a chance, feel free to print this out. It's for you to use at your own leisure. And if you weren't with us yesterday, I highly recommend that you print this out. So, hi Stacy, thanks for tuning in. Again, if you are here with me, go ahead and say hi so that I know that you're here. It's the only way that I know and to interact with you. I appreciate you joining and watching. So signs of burnout fall in 2 buckets, hyperarousal, and on the opposite end of that is hypoarousal. Now we identified the characteristics of if you're hyperactivated, your muscles are probably really tense. You're more likely to feel emotional about something. You could have a tendency to overreact. You might even act impulsively or respond in a way that you wouldn't normally do that. If you're on the opposite end of hypoactivated, you might be experiencing chronic fatigue. That's usually a common sign of that, or you don't care about much, and even at the point where you feel numb and you just completely disassociate with the situation altogether. So what happens with these 2 buckets of the hyperarousal and hypoarousal, out of the 12 characteristics that we had listed, I had you tally, many people had indicated that they were far more on the hyperarousal side. So they had said that they have 7 or 8 out of 12. Hypoarousal, people had recorded in this group that were watching about 6s. So that's normal. A lot of times we have more symptoms in hyperarousal than we do in hypoarousal. And so what happens is when our stress response system is activated, it is put into place so that we can fend for our lives. And I know that if you've watched my past mini-series, I've talked about it. It's also out there among education trainings, common education trainings of neuroscience. So what happens when we're in that hyperarousal state, our adrenaline starts pumping, our hormones are activated so that we can fight for our lives. Okay, and when we're hypoarousal, what happens is our system completely slows down. And this is a way that we can preserve any energy that we have in order to save our lives. So this might be on a day that you might come home and you're just like exhausted and you can't hardly even function and you can't attend to the environment that you're in. That would be you're in a hypoarousal state if you're experiencing that. So as caregivers, we actually will never be able to avoid the negative effects of this work. But truly, if we develop the right skills, we can stay in it without having to suffer too much and hopefully avoid permanent burnout. Yesterday, I had shared a story. There's a statistic, 40 to 50% of teachers resign within their first 5 years of teaching. And I almost became one of those statistics, truly. And if we can learn the right skills and we can learn how to deactivate our stress response system, we can actually stay in this field much longer and not have to feel overwhelmed and completely burnt out as I did, which I had shared yesterday. So if you are here with me, I see a few people have come on, a few more people. Please say hi. Let me know that you're here. Again, if you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat and I will be sure to try and answer them as I'm doing this training, or I will go back and answer. So in the hyperarousal state, as the adrenaline gets pumped, what happens is our brain doesn't know from truth, like fake, and the reality. So I want you to think about a time that you have watched a movie, a scary movie maybe, or a highly active movie, and you're just at the edge of your seat. Have you all watched a scary movie and you just felt your heart racing and you were just like staring and you didn't know what to do, or you were just anticipating what's going to happen next? In that state, if you have done that, what happened was your brain perceived a threat in your living room while you were watching the movie, and your body had a physiological response. So your heart was pounding, maybe your palms were sweating, or you just couldn't handle what was going to happen next, or maybe you even cringed and looked away. That is a complete demonstration of being in a hyperarousal state. And then if you think about a situation where all of a sudden you've had a student in your classroom and they have acted or reacted so many times, the first few times you were involved, your heart got racing, you cared about the situation, and then over time you maybe became numb to that, and you're just like, oh, the situation's happening once again, and now all of a sudden you're non-reactive. And I mean not pretending to be non-reactive, I'm saying you're really non-reactive inside, deep inside, and you're like, well, whatever, that happens now, or it doesn't really even faze you, and when normally it should. That's a good example of how we get into the hypoarousal state. Okay, so all of this is okay when it happens occasionally. And what we need is we need the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system working together. So the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the hyperarousal, meaning we get highly activated and we're like, ah, and then the parasympathetic is more where we're just like this. And we kind of go completely detached. So there are times where we want them to kick in and take over, and that's a really healthy thing. But when it's kicking in and taking over our everyday lives, that's when it becomes very dangerous. So as you did this checklist, if you had symptoms out of the 12 on each side, I would say if you have 4 or higher, you're starting to get into moderate or high risk of burnout. And we don't want this going on for too long, because when it goes on too long, we end up with, problems, health problems, such as disease. I talked about that. It is disease is how we pronounce it, but really if you break it down, it's dis-ease. And so what happens is that constant pumping of hormones within our system, it wreaks havoc on our energy levels, our adrenal glands, on our liver functioning, our blood pressure, all of that. And we can easily develop autoimmune disorders. As a result, we can get to a point of mental health disorders, get to a point of really no return, where we have to go on medication, or we're not able to work or function as much as possible. So we want to avoid that. And being part of this training and just learning about your nervous system and how to deactivate that is where we start. So yesterday we talked about where you were, signs of burnout, again, where you are. Now we're talking about your nervous system and how that is meant to kick in. So what happens if we have many of us at high levels of stress? Think about that. If we all come together in a room, have you ever walked into a room and you can just feel the tension of the room and you had no idea what happened? Type yes if that has happened to you. If you walked in a room and you can feel that tension, but you don't know what happened, what took hold is your mirror neurons activated. And I just have a handout here because yesterday I tried to share my screen, and Facebook has now removed the feature where you can share your screen a little bit and then come back. But mirror neurons is what happens. So when I observe behavior responding in one way, then what happens is I might respond to that behavior. I'm going to automatically respond to it, or my body can mirror it. So a really, really good example is yawning. Have you ever been there and you see someone yawn and automatically you start yawning? And it's just an automatic habit that happens. and you didn't even realize that happened. Actually, when I was much younger, I would sit in class and fake a yawn just to see how many people I could get yawning. This is when I was bored or didn't feel like I wanted to tend to the teacher. And the truth was is I could usually get anywhere from 5 to 10 kids to yawn just by even faking a yawn. So that is mirror neurons. And when we think about if we hang out with people for quite a long time, we tell kids you are who you hang out with. That is true. Over time, we will start mirroring habits of one another. And we do this without even recognizing that we've done that. And so if we have a bunch of people in a room that are, let's say they're at stress level 7 or higher, and you are highly activated, so whether it's your hypoarousal or hyperarousal, our frontal lobe starts shutting down, as we've talked about in past mini series. If you haven't, they're available in this Facebook group. Oh, sorry, my dog is right here. So what happens is our full capacity to think through situations and get through tasks under a great amount of stress doesn't happen. We start losing that full ability to accomplish tasks that we need to accomplish when our stress levels are at 7 or higher. So we don't want that. If we're in a room full of people that are 7 or higher and I'm at a 5, or let's say I'm even down at a stress level of like 3, what's going to happen is we're going to start playing a tug of war. And we're going to start with the mirror neuron effect. I'm going to start possibly adapting or adopting, I should say, higher stress levels. And then someone, I may be strong enough to pull someone to adopting a little bit less stress levels just by interacting. So if you think about, sometimes you might reach out to people and they just put you into a positive mood. That is also a positive or mirror neuron effect. So anytime I want some true belly laughter, I always call my dad. He's the guy. And again, that is mirror neurons. So when we think about that, we think about our nervous system getting activated, taking over as it's meant to. But I want to tell you that you don't have to allow it to take over. You can actually pause and you can actually take control over your nervous system. And you also, just because mirror neurons are happening and we're in this constant exchange of information without even talking about it, we don't have to automatically assume what someone else is feeling. So I'm going to teach you some strategies on how to protect yourself from that. So what happens, I want to talk about the cumulative effect of this, how burnout happens. Burnout doesn't happen just from one event. Rarely do we find ourselves just one situation happen and now we're completely burnt out and we're ready to resign, or we're going to leave the profession altogether, or we're feeling like we can't come back another day. So in my house, I used to have a room that at one point it wasn't used very often. So I put a tub or two of baby clothes in it just to get it out of the way. You know, we were busy and I had every intention of donating this tub of clothes or selling it in a garage sale. And so the next thing I know, the next season comes and we put another couple tubs as well as baby furniture in this room. And before I knew it, I want to say probably within a year, as I was cleaning things out and organizing, I had 3 walls of tubs all the way from floor to ceiling. And it got to the point where it was even pushing out towards the doorway, full of boxes, and the kids would love to come in, and this is where they like to play hide and seek, and the tubs would start tipping over a little bit, and it got a little bit of, you know, risky for them to play in, but it was an accumulative effect of what happened. And all I meant was just to put a couple tubs away, and before I know it, I had this entire room full of junk that I needed to get rid of. How many of you have had that? Like you have a room that you just store things and it just keeps stacking, or even a junk drawer? Let me know if you have that. Say, me too. And that's exactly what happens with the burnout. So my room became so full that I actually ended up calling in and asking for help to take care of it, or it took me several days to get through it. I actually did hire someone, a professional organizer, just to take care of it because I just became so overwhelmed. And so that's what's going to happen with burnout. When we find ourselves of completely burnt out, we are now at the point of where the room is so stacked, we don't even know where to begin. It's one little thing that happened, and it just keeps stacking on each other. And until we get to the point where we can't do it anymore and we are completely depleted. We don't want to be there. We don't want to be there at all. So one of the most common questions that I get is, well, Shylla, how do I learn how to stop this? How do I prevent this when I have all these environmental factors happening and I have all these constant demands? And really, my answer is to learn more about compassion fatigue. And a great place to start is with my course on compassion fatigue. So before I let you go, I know that I promised to give you this information in 20 minutes or less, and it's a lot. I just want to leave you with this story. At night, my boys and I, we read bedtime stories, and one of our favorite stories is The Giving Tree. And I'm not going to read this story to you, but if you've ever read The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, it is about a beautiful relationship among this little boy who finds comfort with the tree. This tree provides such lovely care for the boy. Over time, he swings from the tree's branches, eats the tree's apples, takes a nap in her shade. As the boy gets older, he comes back, or he goes away a little bit more and more, but comes back to visit. And every time he comes back, he needs something from her. And she is so kind, and she loves the boy so much that she just gives. She gives her apples for him to sell and make money at the market. She gives her branches for him to build a home, I believe. Gives her trunk so that he can sail away on a boat. And as he gets older, and he is gone for a while, and the tree really misses him so, he comes back as an old man, and the only thing that's left is her trunk. And she is so kind to say, she straightens herself up and just says, go ahead and have a seat. And he does. But when I think about this story, it is such a lovely story, but yet it is a great parallel to, I think, what happens in caregivers. We give and give and give to a point where we have nothing left. And as this tree gave everything that she had and was nothing but a stump, she got to a point where she couldn't grow anymore and she could no longer blossom and flourish. And that's what we do as caregivers. We give and we give. And unless we have the strategies that we need, we want to be able to get to a point where we can continue to blossom and we can provide fruits to our kids, the goods to our kids, without giving everything that we have. So join me tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to learn some really hands-on techniques on how to deactivate the nervous system that kicks in. We're going to learn how to deactivate the hypoarousal and hyperarousal states. So thank you so much for joining me. If you've watched again, let me know that you're here on the replay, or let me know that you're here. Thank you for everyone that was with me and took time out of your evening. Hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.